All right, folks, the palace coup is on. Democrats are ready to toss Joe Biden off the back of the train. They are done with the old man, and they are leaking like a sieve. Plus, JD Vance makes his debut as the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party. First, one thing is clear in the 2024 election, the fight for America's core values is more important than ever. The Daily Wire is on the front lines of that fight. We can't win without you. Join us right now while we're offering 47% off annual memberships. Head on over to dailywire.com. Use promo code FIGHT at checkout. So, Joe Biden has a serious problem on his hands from his own party at this point. And it appeared for a moment there like maybe the pressure on him to go was going to let up. And now it is broken out full force into the open. And that is because of all the polling data. Apparently, according to the New York Times, Democratic leaders have come to their conversations with Joe Biden armed with grim new data. According to a poll from Blue Rose Research, a firm that formed from, but is no longer affiliated with Future Forward, which is the super PAC that supports Biden, just 18% of voters and 36% of people who voted for Biden in 2020 believe he is mentally fit and up to the job of being president. Chuck Schumer, according to Democrats close to him, was given data from a leading Democratic super PAC showing Biden's deficit growing to 5 percentage points or more in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and his deficit in 3 other key states, Nevada, Georgia, and Arizona, outside the margin of sampling error. So the poll numbers are declining, and this necessitates it's time for a conversation about pulling the plug on Joe. Now, let's be clear that at this point in the 2024 cycle, it is very clear that God's team, his writing team here, they're just throwing everything. They're just throwing every plot point into that pot at this point. They've got a stew going, and God's got that stew going. He's got the cabinet, and every plot point in the cabinet is going into the stew at this point. This is season 8 of Game of Thrones. Hey, God is tired of dragging this thing out over the course of seasons. And so no longer will it take 2 seasons to get from King's Landing all the way to the frozen north. Instead, we're going to be there in 5 seconds flat with the dragons because the plot points are coming fast and furious. It's drinking from a fire hose. In the last month alone, we had Joe Biden's full-scale collapse on stage in the debate. We had 2 weeks of debate about whether he was going to go, including multiple bizarre interviews with the president of the United States. We then had an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We then had Donald Trump's selection of vice presidential candidate. And now it turns out Joe Biden has COVID. Now, that's the least of his concerns. His senility is the most of his concerns. And when I say his senility, I mean, he is gone and everyone knows it. We've all known it for years, but now you're allowed to say it because it's so clear. So he did an interview with BET in which he was talking about his defense secretary, Lloyd Austin. And he literally forgets the name of his own defense secretary and calls him the black guy. That is a thing that is happening in real life, like right now. Here is Joe Biden.
And so it's all about treating people with dignity. And it's about making sure that, look, I mean, for example, look at the heat I'm getting because I named the Secretary of Defense, the black man. I named Ketanji Brown. I mean, because of the people I've named.
The Secretary of Defense, the black man? Well, I mean, was that his qualification or what? Are we allowed to say that he's a DEI pick if Joe Biden says that he picked him for being a black man? Or what are the rules at this point? There is something wrong here, obviously. But now, perhaps, they have finally the excuse to pull the plug on the old man. They put him in hospice care, political hospice care. And now they're just having the intra-family debate about whether Joe Biden wants to live under these conditions, or his campaign wants to live under these conditions, or whether Joe really would want in his living will for the plug to be pulled. The president of the United States is obviously falling apart. The U.S. dollar may be soon to follow. Saudi Arabia recently ended its 50-year petrodollar deal with the United States. That does have the potential to weaken the American dollar. Since 1974, Saudi Arabia has sold oil solely in American dollars, which was huge for our global economic dominance. Now they're looking at other options. If there's less demand for the U.S. dollar, what happens to its value? It's for reasons like this I feel it's important to diversify some of your savings into gold. You can do that with the help of Birch Gold. Right now, qualifying purchases by July 31st are eligible to get a one-of-a-kind, limited edition Golden Truth Bomb. The only way to claim your eligibility is by texting Ben to 989898. Protect your savings by diversifying away from the U.S. dollar with gold. Text Ben to 989898. Birch Gold will help you convert an old IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold for no money out of pocket. Right now, qualifying purchases will get a limited edition Golden Truth Bomb. Text Ben to 989898. That's Ben to 989898 today. These are very uncertain and perilous times. Diversification is a smart investment strategy no matter who you are or where you are located in life. Text Ben to 989898 to ask your questions to my friends at Birch Gold and get started. So in that same interview with BET, Joe Biden suggested a way out for Democrats, and that is that he would drop out if he had a medical issue.
Is there anything that you would look to, you personally, not anybody else, not other pundits, not even perhaps family members, that you would look to say, if I see that, I will reevaluate?
If there had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem.
Okay, well, we've seen a few problems from Joe Biden, like his inability to climb stairs, right? This has been an ongoing battle. It's like American Gladiator, Joe Biden trying to climb the stairs. This is him literally yesterday trying to climb the stairs over in Nevada, I believe. And it doesn't go well. This is not, by the way, slowed down footage. This is actual footage of him trying to climb stairs. And so for those who can't see, he is moving like the sloth from Zootopia. Like, he's barely moving. He's kind of, watch as he goes up these stairs. He's taking these stairs like my 16-month-old. Like, legitimately. Like, my goodness. We didn't slow that down at all. This is insane. I'm sorry. This is all crazy. He can't climb stairs. And those were the short stairs. And it still took him like 8 minutes to climb those stairs. Okay, well, now finally they have their excuse. Joe Biden has the deadliest disease known to mankind. Joe Biden has it. COVID. Now, that's obviously very, very upsetting considering that the man is sextuple vaxxed at this point. Half his body weight is made up of the vaccine at this point. Nonetheless, the president tested positive for COVID-19 on Wednesday. They are making him comfortable before deciding what to do with him, the Democratic Party. He's experiencing mild symptoms, according to White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. Biden will be returning to Delaware, where he will self-isolate and will continue to carry out all his duties fully during that time. What does that mean? It means he's going to have the full weekend to decide whether or not he's going to go. I will say I'm very much enjoying the spectacle of the media trying to square their prior statements about COVID with Joe Biden's behavior now that we know that he's had COVID. So he's walking around, I mean, in that video, unmasked near other people. And so Wolf Blitzer is like, where's his mask? Where's his mask? The religious adherents, they're out there shaming him. They're shouting at him, shame, shame, where's the mask?
The president has received probably at least 5 doses of vaccine, as a lot of us have, and has also had the virus once. And that has really, all of those elements serve to increase his immunity. Plus, we also have Paxlovid now, and we've already heard that he's going to take a dose of that.
Dr. Reiner, we're seeing live pictures of the president boarding Air Force One right now. And what jumped out at me, and I'm sure to others as well, I didn't see him wearing a mask as he was with those other people on the tarmac there.
Oh, goodness gracious. That's the big issue, is they did not wearing a mask. Wolf Blitzer there coming in from the ropes on that one. Okay, but all of this is happening because there have been a bunch of meetings from top-level Democrats with Joe Biden telling him he needs to get out. And the thing about these meetings is that they are now being put out there, clearly. They're being put out. First of all, this is the worst campaign. I got to say, this is the worst campaign I have ever seen in my life. It's extraordinarily, it's like there are no superlatives sufficient to describe how bad this campaign is. Let me give you a quick example. So the news breaks that Joe Biden has COVID, and whoever the intern is who runs his social media put up the following tweet. Okay, the tweet says, I'm sick. That is his first tweet, I'm sick. And then it is followed up with, of Elon Musk and his rich buddies trying to buy this election. Okay, so the first tweet says, I'm sick. And then the follow-up is that, which you'd think that's not going to go viral in precisely the wrong way. Like, what the hell is wrong with your social media team? It's crazy. I put up a mock-up of Joe Biden's tweet. And his first tweet says, I have stage 3 dementia. And then the reply is, funding to complete if you reelect me. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Well, maybe that's one of the reasons why, again, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are privately telling Joe Biden he needs to leave, he needs to go get out. And here's the thing. Joe Biden, his team keeps saying he won't leave. So now Schumer and Jeffries and Pelosi, they're all leaking. They're leaking like a sieve. They're leaking to the press, saying over and over publicly, they're trying to publicly shame him out of the race. According to the Washington Post, Jeffries met with Biden on Thursday night at the White House. Schumer met with him on Saturday in Rehoboth Beach. In the meetings, the congressional leaders discussed their members' concerns that Biden could deprive them of majorities, giving Republicans a much easier path to push through legislation, according to 4 people briefed on the meetings who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe the private talks. In a separate one-on-one conversation, a person close to Biden told the president directly he should end his candidacy, saying that was the only way to preserve his legacy and save the country from another Trump term. Biden responded he adamantly disagreed with that opinion. He's the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump. The person spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe a private conversation. So Schumer then released a statement saying, we have discussions, but I'm not going to say what we were talking about, which is a confirmation of the story. Hakeem Jeffries did the same. He said, well, I conveyed the feelings of our members to President Biden. But it is not just Jeffries and Schumer. Pelosi has been a driving force in all of this. According to Politico, the developments underscore a new, more public phase of the Dump Biden movement. It's an astonishing turn of events that puts Biden's presidential bid on life support. With Democratic leaders like Pelosi, Schumer, and Jeffries against him, how can he possibly continue? There is, in effect, no mistaking what party leaders are thinking now. Schumer could have denied the exchange. He did not. Jeffries could have corrected it. He did not. And all week, as news about Pelosi working behind the scenes against Joe Biden trickled out, the former speaker could have taken to TV to firmly defend her longtime ally and friend. She did not. The flurry of leaks comes as Pelosi herself has coordinated with senior Democrats to try to push Biden out, cranking up the pressure on the president bit by bit in the hopes that he'll get the picture. Politico says, we've covered Pelosi for a long time now and can tell you her fingerprints are all over the knife. Okay, man. Woo! The palace coup is upon us. Meanwhile, Pelosi's allies on the Hill, including California Democratic representatives Adam Schiff, Mike Levin, and Jared Huffman, have coordinated with other members, organizing letters advancing the conversation when needed. There's nothing subtle about Nancy, another Pelosi ally, told Playbook. Each time the Dump Biden movement seemed to stall, it was Pelosi who personally took pains to help revive it. We've covered Pelosi for years. We know how she operates. She and Schiff are wired in the same way. They're so close that other House Democrats call them the California Mafia. Why is that important? Because Adam Schiff put out a statement just yesterday calling on Biden to, quote unquote, pass the torch. He said, Biden has been one of our most consequential presidents in our nation's history. He said, our nation is at a crossroads. A second Trump presidency will undermine the very foundation of our democracy. I have serious concerns about whether the president can defeat Donald Trump in November. He said, I believe it's time for him to pass the torch. And he said he would support whomever ended up being the Democratic nominee. Now, again, that doesn't happen without Nancy Pelosi's express written consent, like a gilded invitation from Nancy Pelosi to Schiff to go out there front and center and just say the thing. So far, Biden, of course, has resisted this. So far, Biden has said that he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to leave. He thinks he's the best possibility against Donald Trump. But the poll data is the poll data. Jeffrey Katzenberg, who is one of Joe Biden's top fundraisers, apparently spoke with Biden in Las Vegas. And Katzenberg traveled specifically there to tell him to drop out. Senior campaign officials tell Deadline the meeting was routine on a number of matters as well as donors, and nothing out of the ordinary occurred. But you don't fly to Vegas to see the candidate you're giving tens of millions of dollars to unless you actually want something from him. Apparently, he told Joe Biden donor cash is drying up. So, top Biden fundraisers are losing sleep. And I got to tell you, have you ever found yourself losing sleep at night, tossing and turning, unable to get comfortable because you're just too hot? One leg under the blanket, one leg sticking out. You still can't get it together. Boll & Branch is here to help you never sleep hot again with sheets that are woven to allow airflow and feel cool and crisp to the touch. Perfect for sleepers who run hot. Boll & Branch has amazing options for hot sleepers. Choose from 100% organic cotton percale made with a naturally cooling weave, or their linen, which is made from European flax to be light, airy, and softer than soft. I've been talking about Boll & Branch for years because their product is just that good. They keep me cool during those hot Florida nights. These are truly luxury sheets. They get softer every time you wash them. They're just that good. In fact, we threw out all of the other sheets in our home. Boll & Branch sheets are loved by millions of sleepers. They have over 11,000 five-star reviews. Best of all, Boll & Branch gives you a 30-night worry-free guarantee, which means you can wash, style, sleep in their sheets for an entire month. And if you don't love them, you can send them right back with free returns on all U.S. orders. Get your coolest, most comfortable sleep during Boll & Branch's annual summer event with 20% off site-wide plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/Ben. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/Ben for 20% off and free shipping. Limited time only. Exclusions apply. See site for details. And again, Bernie Sanders is doing the same thing. Bernie did an interview with the New Yorker's Isaac Chotiner. And here is the exchange. Chotiner, when you yourself say you have concerns about whether Joe Biden would be able to finish a second term, I think it's hard to ask people to. And then Sanders said, I didn't say that. I did not. I didn't say that. And Chotiner said, well, you said I have concerns about everything. And he said, well, don't. Well, yeah, I am. I am concerned about the existential threat of climate change. Chotiner says, you're not concerned about whether Joe Biden can be president in 2028, 2029? You're not concerned about that? And Sanders said, I'm concerned about a lot of things. But yeah, Joe Biden will get elected. If Joe Biden gets elected, everybody's health is in question. And Shatner said, I would just say you're not being able to say this clearly is a reason people might have doubts about whether he should be the nominee and feel the party should choose someone who people feel confident can finish their term. And Sanders said, you're doing exactly what I've been plotting. If you want to make the case, Biden is not the perfect candidate for a dozen different reasons. Go ahead. And you're right. But tell me, you've got a better path forward? I don't think you do. So what Sanders is saying there is he is deeply afraid that Kamala Harris is going to do even worse. But we are now reaching a tipping point for Joe Biden. Multiple media outlets now reporting that Joe Biden is seriously considering dropping out of the race. He's been asking his aides whether they believe that Kamala Harris can win. Now, if they're honest, the answer is probably not. Her poll numbers kind of suck. I mean, she'll probably do better than Biden at this point, simply because the entire American public, outside of the immediate Biden family, one of whom is a crack addict and the other of whom is the actual president, his wife, they believe that he's, I guess, still okay. And every other human being believes that he's gone mentally, and he proves it every time he goes on the TVs. But, and Kamala Harris is, she's at least alive. She speaks words out of her, they're incompetent words, they're stupid words, they're circular words, but they are in fact words that come out of her face hole. So she'll probably do better than Biden. Whatever the case, Joe Biden is now clearly more open to leaving than he was, which, by the way, once that dam breaks, he's done. So here we are, July 18th, a couple weeks to the Democratic convention. And I'm going to say he's toast. I'm going to say that Joe Biden's going to crack and he's going to go. Here is CNN saying the thing.
Talking to a senior Democratic advisor tonight who was telling me this. He said he believes the president is being, quote, more receptive to these calls of concern. He goes on to say this: the private conversations with the Hill are continuing, this advisor tells me. He's being receptive, not as defiant as he is publicly. Goes on to saying, talking about Vice President Kamala Harris, who initially he wondered how she may fare in a campaign should it come to that. I'm told now he's asking questions saying, do you think Kamala can win? Again, this advisor offers caution saying this: it is still unclear where he's going to land, but he seems to be listening.
Okay, again, the reason that he's listening is because the poll numbers really are quite bad for him. They're really quite bad. Okay, latest polls from Emerson in the swing states: Pennsylvania, Trump +5, Wisconsin, Trump +5, Michigan, Trump +3, Nevada, Trump +5, North Carolina, Trump +7, Georgia, Trump +6, Arizona, Trump +7. That same polling outfit did a sort of generic poll, younger Democrat versus Trump. Now again, generic candidate always does better than real person because everybody can create their fantasy candidate in their head. So there's no way that Kamala Harris does these numbers, but these are the numbers that people are looking at when they say it can be anyone else. It's also the numbers they're looking at when, as we'll see, some are calling for an open convention. Emerson says younger Democrat versus Trump. Pennsylvania, Democrat +6. Wisconsin, Democrat +8. Michigan, Democrat +10. Nevada, Democrat +8. North Carolina, Democrat +2. Georgia, Democrat +10. Arizona, Democrat +6. By the way, these numbers should remind Republicans this election is far from over. I understand that everybody is very triumphal at this point. And listen, Donald Trump is the odds-on favorite to be the president of the United States by all the data at this point. But you can't let up, especially because in 2 weeks' time, Donald Trump may not be running against Joe Biden anymore. That may be a thing of the past. And again, given the fact that we are now in season 8 of Trump and God's writers are pouring out every plot point, I would bet my money on Biden being out of this race in the next 2 weeks. And if that happens, this race gets upended. A lot of calculations shift. Doesn't mean that Trump isn't still the favorite. It does mean you're going to have to game out an entirely new strategy. You assume that Kamala Harris would be the person who replaces him, but not necessarily. And a lot of Democrats are looking at these polling numbers and they're saying, well, what if he just threw it up in the air? What if Biden just decided, you know what? I'm throwing this thing up in the air. I don't care about Kamala Harris. The whole reason I'm getting out is so that we win. Open convention. First of all, it'll be the most fascinating political occurrence of our lifetime. Just, we haven't had an open convention in American politics since 1952, maybe a true open convention. So it would be amazing to watch. By the way, if Biden were actually smart and he actually cared about winning, he would announce that he is stepping down from the race tonight. Right? He would do it before Trump's speech. He would eat up all the attention around Trump. All of a sudden, the camera would swivel back into the Democratic Party and it would become an odds-on fight in terms of who becomes the nominee. Now, there's some people who are suggesting that it has to be Kamala Harris. Because if it's not Kamala Harris, the black community will be so darn angry, they just won't turn out. What if it's Wes Moore from Maryland, who is black? And there's that. What if it turns out that Kamala Harris isn't that popular with black voters, which is the reason why Joe Biden skunked her in 2020? You'll remember Kamala Harris was a presidential primary candidate in 2020. Go check out, by the way, our 3-part series on Kamala Harris called Scamala over at Daily Wire Plus. Check it out right now so you have all the details on Kamala, who is, at least a 50% shot at this point to be the Democratic nominee. But Democrats are apparently trying to force Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who is very competent and very articulate, into the race. They're hoping that he would join on to say a Kamala Harris ticket. So it'd be like Harris Shapiro, not me. Josh Shapiro, the Democrat from Pennsylvania. There are a lot of thoughts in the Democratic Party, but it is chaos over there. And the knives are out. And Pelosi and Schumer and Jeffries and all the rest. It's a tout brute moment. Julius Caesar is down. The knives are in him. And it was only a matter now of how fast Joe Biden's candidacy bleeds out. It's chaos in the Democratic Party. And Joe Biden's campaign is looking unwell. Well, if you are worried about the possibility that you might be unwell at some point and it's hard to get access to the medication you need a medical emergency kit from the Wellness Company. I have one. It's brilliant. Honestly, we actually travel with it. First of all, it's not a simple first aid kit. It contains essential life-saving medications that are often in short supply, like amoxicillin, Z-Pak, ivermectin, and more. It's like having an urgent care in your home. The medical emergency kit includes 8 doctor-prescribed medications and a comprehensive guidebook for safely treating over 30 illnesses and infections, like COVID, strep throat, pneumonia, bronchitis, tick bites, UTIs, and more. No doctor visits, no pharmacies, no copay. Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit. Go to urgentcarekit.com/Ben. Answer a few quick questions online. Your kit will be delivered right to your door. Use promo code Ben to get $45 off right now. That's urgentcarekit.com/Ben. Enter promo code Ben at checkout. Again, that's urgentcarekit.com/Ben. It's a wonderful and easy way to make sure that your family is medically safe in times when you might not be near a pharmacy. You might not have access to the medication you need. Go check them out right now. urgentcarekit.com/Ben. The Trump campaign hilariously is acknowledging the obvious. So apparently, Kamala Harris agreed to 3 potential debate dates with Senator JD Vance, who of course is the vice presidential nominee for the Republicans. The Trump campaign immediately responded, quote, "We don't know who the Democrat nominee for vice president is going to be. We can't lock in a date before their convention. To do so would be unfair to Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Gretchen Whitmer, or whomever Kamala Harris picks as her running mate." Okay. Like everybody acknowledges this at this point. Okay, so again, the death of Joe Biden's candidacy is a huge story. Obviously, it's the biggest political story of our lifetimes. We've never seen a sitting president simply drop out of the race. Certainly not since LBJ, obviously, and not in a term where, again, he has like another full term to go. He's 3 years in. LBJ assumed the mantle in 1963. And then he didn't give up the mantle until 1969. Right? That's when he left office. Here, Joe Biden has been president for like 3.5 years, and he's already giving up the mantle. So it's pretty unprecedented what we are watching right now with Joe Biden. And again, I'm just urging Republicans, don't sleep on this election. Don't think this thing is all wrapped up. It is only July. This is not October. Despite the fact that Donald Trump has had the best political month of any presidential candidate that I can remember. In the polling data, he is currently beating Joe Biden on average by 2.5 points. And he's polling at 47%. If you're up around 52%, 53%, I would say the election is over. At 47%, the election is not over, not with a new candidate for the Democrats possibly in play. Which means all of the traditional calculations have to be back in play for Republicans. What is your voter turnout operation like? Who is doing it? How strong is that going to be? Right? All the fundamentals still apply. And Donald Trump is a candidate. He's more Teflon than any candidate of our lifetime, including Ronald Reagan. But that doesn't mean he can defy the laws of political gravity. Which, again, is not to be a downer. It's to be realistic and to urge everybody to get out and get active if you want Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States. Okay, over on the other side of the coin, RNC Night 3 was last night. Democrats, again, still in a state of outright despair. Van Jones, who obviously is on the Democratic side of the aisle, he's on CNN last night. And he was noting the obvious differential in momentum between the two parties.
A bullet couldn't stop Trump. A virus just stopped Biden. You've got the nominees of this party getting their butts kissed. Biden's getting his butt kicked by his own party. The Democrats are coming apart. The Republicans are coming together.
He is not wrong about any of that. He's not wrong about any of that. So, the RNC last night was very much about the introduction of JD Vance, but more importantly, this entire RNC has been about presenting a permission structure for people who have not traditionally voted Republican to vote Republican. That's what the entire thing is about. And so the RNC Night 3, it's been very well produced. It's been very well crafted. They've done an excellent job of creating a speakers list. And RNC Night 3 sort of broke down into three categories. Category 1 was the Trump family. So that included Kai Madison Trump, who is Donald Trump's granddaughter, Don Trump Jr.'s daughter. Here she was speaking on her grandfather. It was quite heartwarming. It was very nice.
Even when he's going through all these court cases, he always asks me how I'm doing. A lot of people have put my grandpa through hell, and he's still standing. The media makes my grandpa seem like a different person, but I know him for who he is. He's very caring and loving. He truly wants the best for this country, and he will fight every single day to make America great again.
I mean, it was very nice, obviously. Don Trump Jr. also spoke at the convention last night. His speech, of course, Don Trump Jr. Is a very fiery guy, and his speech was a rabble-rousing speech for sure.
They've turned criminals into victims, prosecutors into criminal defense attorneys, and police into public enemies. Left-wing activists are pretending to be educators, teaching our kids that there are 57 genders, but they can't even define what a woman is. On one hand, they think free speech protects their right to expose your children to explicit drag shows. On the other hand, they want to put you in jail for making a meme. It's like the entire world has been turned upside down.
The Trump family reunion, obviously, they're saying that Donald Trump has a good work-life balance, despite being president of the United States. Well, here's the thing. Work-life balance doesn't feel realistic when you're working through lunch or staying late to catch up. Free up the time consumed by tedious mail-in shipping tasks with Stamps.com. Stamps.com streamlines your postage needs, making your business more efficient, putting more life into your work-life balance. Take care of mailing and shipping wherever you are, even on the go with Stamps.com's mobile app. All you need is a computer and printer. They even send you a free scale. Easily schedule package pickups through your Stamps.com dashboard. Automatically see your cheapest and fastest shipping options from different carriers. Put more life into your work-life balance with Stamps.com. Sign up at Stamps.com/Shapiro for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just head on over to Stamps.com/Shapiro. That's Stamps.com/Shapiro. We've been using Stamps.com here at the Daily Wire for years. We don't want to waste our time or waste our money. And honestly, there's nothing worse than having to schlep everything over to the post office. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Don't do that. Instead, head on over to Stamps.com/Shapiro and get that special offer, including a 4-week trial plus free postage and free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Stamps.com/Shapiro. Okay, the actual centerpiece of the RNC last night, the true highlights. And again, we'll get to JD Vance, whose speech was fascinating in a variety of ways. But the true highlights of the night were the everyday American stories. And this is what the RNC has been doing brilliantly. So that was true of night 2 as well. Getting everyday Americans to talk about their plight under Joe Biden is the story because it, again, swivels the focus to the Biden administration's incompetence. And yeah, again, I'm looking at the Pennsylvania Senate race from 2022. In that Pennsylvania Senate race, John Fetterman, who had suffered an actual debilitating stroke, was running against Mehmet Oz. And the Republicans focused all of their focus and their ire not on Fetterman's, at that time, political radicalism. He's since been actually a pretty moderate voice in the Senate and excellent on some issues like Israel. But at that time, he was perceived broadly as sort of a radical socialist type, John Fetterman. Instead of focusing their ire on his policies, they focused their ire on the fact that he had a stroke, and then he won. And so what Republicans have to do, if Joe Biden were to stay in the race, or whoever is in the race, is point out that this administration sucks. This administration is terrible. This administration's policies have harmed countless Americans. And so the most effective parts of the RNC have been the parts where everyday Americans talk about their experiences under Joe Biden. So a bunch of everyday sort of American heroes were brought out. That included, for example, the UNC frat boys. So there's been this wide spate of pro-Hamas protests all across the country, including violence, including trespass, including vandalism, and all the rest. And you'll remember, because we played it on the show, the video of the UNC frat boys who showed up at a pro-Hamas protest carrying, they stopped the American flag from being desecrated. They were brought forth at the RNC. It was a pretty awesome moment.
When a mob tried to take down the American flag on our campus, we knew we couldn't let that happen. We stood guard, we held it up, and we did not let it fall. It was all about respect, not just for the cloth, but for everything that the flag stands for. Too many people have sacrificed everything for it. The least we can do was keep it flying. And tonight, we are proud to honor our flag again.
I mean, that's good stuff. It's just good patriotic stuff. Okay, I will say that the crowd at the RNC is also doing an extraordinarily moving job of reminding everybody there's still 5 American hostages being held in the Gaza Strip by Hamas while Joe Biden continues to pussyfoot around Iran and clear the way for them to get cash. A hostage family spoke. This is the family of one of the American hostages being held. And the crowd started chanting, "Bring them home." You're not going to see this at the DNC. I promise you'll see Palestinian flags at the DNC.
Our son, Omer, is an American citizen. For 285 long days and nights, Hamas terrorists have been holding Omer in prison in tunnels underneath Gaza. Imagine, over 9 months, not knowing whether your son is alive, waking up every morning, praying that he too is still waking up every morning, that he is strong and is surviving.
Bring them home. Bring them home. Bring them home.
Okay. Again, amazing stuff there at the RNC. One of the other speakers, Shabbos Kastenbaum. So I know Shabbos, really, really nice guy. He's a Harvard student. He's currently suing Harvard for discrimination on the basis of Civil Rights Act violations. Shabbos is not a right-winger by any stretch of the imagination. As he said in his speech, in 2016, he voted for Bernie Sanders. And the left has completely abandoned Jews in the United States, and they've abandoned American values. That was the point Shabbos was making. And there's a permission structure for people who aren't traditional Republicans to vote Republican in this year's election.
The anti-Semitic bigotry, unfortunately, extends far beyond the universities. Although I once voted for Bernie Sanders, I now recognize that the far left has not only abandoned the Jewish people, but the American people. The Democratic Party, the party I registered to vote for the day I turned 18, has become ideologically poisoned. And it is this poison, it is this corruption that is infecting far too many young American students. Let's be clear. The far left's anti-Semitic extremism has no virtue, and the radicalism on our campuses and on our streets has no moral legitimacy.
Again, the point of all this for the RNC is bring people up there who aren't traditional Republicans and let them talk. And then bring up the most moving moments of the night. Clearly, there were 2 really moving moments of the night. First, a World War II veteran who is 98 years old got up and talked to the convention. And it's just, astonishing. First of all, this guy is significantly more with it than the current president of the United States. And he's 98 years old. It really is kind of an amazing thing. His name is William Peckrell, and he was speaking about America. And if you weren't moved, honestly, I'm not sure that you have the capacity to be moved if you weren't moved by this.
And President Trump, back in Commander-in-Chief, I would go back to re-enlist today. And I would storm whatever beach my country needs me to.
Yeah. But by far the most moving and effective moment of the night, however, was the Gold Star families. So Gold Star families came forth, and these are the Gold Star families of the soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan during the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, which, by the way, was the turning point of the Biden presidency. You can look at the poll numbers. He dropped into negatives because he surrendered in Afghanistan to the world's worst human beings and got 13 American soldiers killed in the process and left tens of thousands of people who had allied themselves with America behind to be slaughtered by the Taliban. It destroyed his presidency, really. And then he had the temerity to go on that debate with Donald Trump and not only not mention any of the soldiers who had died at Abbey Gate, but to pretend that no soldiers had died on his watch, which is a lie. It is not true. So we'll get to the most moving moment of the night in just a moment, because it really was an amazing, amazing thing. First, folks, we got to break this down. The 2024 election season, it is heating up. The left is pushing their radical agenda harder than ever. Well, at the Daily Wire, we're not just talking about the problem, we fight back. But we can only do that if you support us. So here's our offer, a massive 47% discount on annual Daily Wire Plus memberships. Why 47%? Because obviously we want Donald Trump to be the 47th president of the United States. This isn't just some arbitrary discount. It is your chance to access unfiltered, hard-hitting conservative content the mainstream media will not touch. With your membership, you get it all. Ad-free shows, podcasts that make you smarter, in-depth reporting, live news coverage. No censorship, no leftist spin, just facts. Time's of the essence here. Go to dailywire.com right now. Use promo code FIGHT at checkout for 47% off your annual membership right now. And be clear, the left is not taking a day off. We can't either. Your support isn't just appreciated, it's crucial for our fight. Go to dailywire.com. Use code FIGHT to save 47%. And so the most moving moment of the night last night at the RNC was the segment about Gold Star families. So the RNC put out a video, and they put it up on the big screen, obviously, of Gold Star families from Abbey Gate talking about how their kids had died at Abbey Gate and how Joe Biden had basically sold them out. Here's some of the video.
I'm talking to people. I'm calling his girlfriend. I'm saying, well, have you heard from him? Calling his sisters. Have you heard from him? You know, we're texting. We're saying, please, just send us a text. Just whatever. Just let us know that you're okay.
When all the explosions went off, I had messaged her and I said, hey, you know, I know you can't say anything, but, you know, just an emoji. Just a bubble.
And then 3:30 in the morning that night, I got the knock on the door. You know, there's no other reason 2 Marines are standing on your door.
Right away, they told you, we have news about your son, and he just passed away. I just start screaming. I throw myself on the floor.
The Gold Star families were then brought out on stage, and they were welcomed by the RNC crowd, and the love in the room was amazing, obviously.
Please welcome to the stage the Gold Star families of our fallen heroes.
Obviously, the moment of the night, all the Gold Star families standing there holding pictures of their kids. Now, what did MSNBC do? They cut away. Of course they did, because MSNBC can't allow the audience to see something like that. So in the middle of that, you can see in the background of this particular shot, the Gold Star family standing there. They decided they had to cut away to get Rachel Maddow's incisive analysis.
Who would less like to join in on this conversation than probably anything else in his entire life. But he is now going to join us. He is our friend Jamie Harrison, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. You have stumbled into quite a conversation, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for being here.
Rachel, I followed it intensely. There's a reason why I don't have any hair.
All that happening while the Gold Star families are being cheered on stage. Just slow clap for the genius programming at MSNBC. Okay, the other big story of the night, obviously, was the introduction of JD Vance on the national stage. So many of us have followed JD Vance for a long time. I've interviewed JD Vance on the show in about 2021. I read his book, Hillbilly Elegy, when it came out in 2016. It's a terrific book, obviously. He was welcomed on a stage by his wife, Usha, who is an American of Indian heritage. And she explains how her story with JD could have only happened in America.
I grew up in San Diego in a middle-class community. with 2 loving parents, both immigrants from India, and a wonderful sister. That JD and I could meet at all, let alone fall in love and marry, is a testament to this great country.
Okay, she then went on to talk about JD Vance on a personal level. And again, it's always heartwarming when you have members of the family talking.
I met JD in law school when he was fresh out of Ohio State, which he attended with the support of the GI Bill. We were friends first because, who wouldn't want to be friends with JD? He was then, as now, the most interesting person I knew. A working class guy who had overcome childhood traumas that I could barely fathom to end up at Yale Law School. A tough Marine who had served in Iraq, but whose idea of a good time was playing with puppies and watching the movie Babe. The most determined person I knew with one overriding ambition: to become a husband and a father, and to build the kind of tight-knit family that he had longed for as a child.
Now, the magic of JD Vance, just in terms of him as a politician and as a person, is his life story. It's a story that's so unbelievable that it was literally made into a Hollywood movie. Think about that for a second. JD Vance is a Republican. He's a Republican who at the age of 31 wrote a book that Hollywood made into a movie starring Amy Adams and Glenn Close. Have you ever heard of another Republican that's even been presented to as an opportunity? Not even remotely. And so in his nomination speech, he accepted the nomination, of course. And then in his nomination speech, he told his story. And his story is amazing. It's truly an amazing story. Again, it's a story so good that it was a best-selling national bestseller. It sold 2 million copies. And so when he speaks about this story, it really is incredible. As we'll discuss in a moment, I think that when it comes to JD's takes on economics, there is a bit of a conflict between his life story as told in Hillbilly Elegy and his economic program. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be part of the conversation. It obviously is part of the conversation. It's a huge part of the conversation right now, but it's certainly heterodox, as we discussed when he was selected as the vice presidential pick by President Trump. But his story, it's unquestionably an amazing American story that requires telling over and over again.
I was lucky. Despite the closing factories and the growing addiction in towns like mine, in my life, I had a guardian angel by my side. She was an old woman who could barely walk, but she was tough as nails. I called her Mamaw, the name we hillbillies gave to our grandmothers. Mamaw raised me as my mother struggled with addiction. Mamaw was in so many ways a woman of contradiction. She loved the Lord, ladies and gentlemen. She was a woman of very deep Christian faith. But she also loved the F word. Now, she once told me, when she found out that I was spending too much time with a local kid who was known for dealing drugs, that if I ever hung out with that kid again, she would run him over with her car.
And it was because of his Mamaw that he grew up with a certain set of values that allowed him to go on to Yale Law School and serve in the military and do all the things that he ended up doing. An amazing moment came when he paid tribute to his mom. So if you've seen the movie Hillbilly Elegy, which again, Hollywood savaged after they made it. So for a hot second, Vance's story was seen as sort of the story of why people voted Trump. And so Hollywood accepted the story, made the movie, and then they decided that Trump was evil. And so then they savaged the movie. So if you look at the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, they do not remotely match up with the actual quality of the film, which is quite good. But his actual life story is that his mom was a drug addict. And so it was his grandma who really did the heavy lifting when he was growing up. His mom was there, and he paid tribute to her and her 10 years of sobriety at the convention. It was pretty like a wonderful American moment.
Our movement is about single moms like mine who struggled with money and addiction but never gave up. And I'm proud to say that tonight my mom is here, 10 years clean and sober. I love you, Mom. And you know, Mom, I was thinking, it'll be 10 years officially in January of 2025. And if President Trump's okay with it, let's have the celebration in the White House.
And it's all wonderful stuff, right? That's just wonderful, wonderful stuff. So JD Vance's speech last night, it focused in on his personal story, and then it veered off into his policy prescriptions. And these, of course, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the week when he was selected for vice president, are very, very heterodox. I mean, really heterodox. Not necessarily on foreign policy, where it has become obviously going wisdom and obvious truth that the war in Iraq was a failure. That obviously is true. And in retrospect, you can see that it was a failure and that it was going to be a failure because now we have the benefit of hindsight. At the time, in 2004, when everybody was supporting the war in Iraq, it was a bit of a different story. And again, the reality is that could that war have gone differently? Perhaps, if you're willing to do what John McCain suggested in 2008 and put people on the ground for 100 years. Americans weren't willing to do that, which calls into question the strategy of the war at the very beginning. But it's really on economics that JD Vance is truly heterodox. And what's fascinating about JD Vance's approach is that if you listen to his speech on economics, it is very difficult to distinguish his take on economics from Elizabeth Warren's or Bernie Sanders. That's just the reality of the situation. There was no talk last night about free markets, about innovation, about dynamic capitalism, about job creation by the private sector. And all of that was basically left by the wayside. And that is, in fact, a shift for JD Vance in terms of his focus. So he connected his story with his policy. But what's kind of strange about that is he connected a very different policy with his story in Hillbilly Elegy. And this is sort of the fascinating thing about JD Vance. And of course, as he mentioned last night in his own speech, there is, in fact, a rather interesting conflict emerging inside the Republican Party about the philosophy of economics that it seeks to embrace. JD Vance's philosophy of economics looks much more like the Democratic Party circa 1989 than it does like the Republican Party for most of my lifetime. It is not a free market economics pitch. And again, it's very different from what he wrote in Hillbilly Elegy. So in Hillbilly Elegy, which was really about, again, that same story that we heard him tell, his takeaway was you have to have strong family members who are willing to inculcate values in the face of extraordinary hardship in order to build a better life. And I read you some quotes from Hillbilly Elegy earlier this week, but I want you to remember those quotes as we talk about his economic plans, which in many ways are very much a reversal from what he preached in Hillbilly Elegy. He said this: what separates the successful from the unsuccessful are the expectations they had for their own lives. Yet the message of the right is increasingly, it's not your fault that you're a loser, it's the government's fault. Right? Well, actually, the case that he made last night is it's sort of private industry's fault and the government's fault. And that's a very different message than the message of Hillbilly Elegy. Again, Hillbilly Elegy, which is the thing that made him famous, and the life story from which he draws is very different from sort of the economic policy that he now seeks to promote. And so the economic story that JD Vance tells is kind of the same as, say, John Edwards in 2004, that it's the Main Street versus Wall Street, that there are two Americas, the America of the investor class and the America of the blue-collar working class. I mean, it sounds exactly like John Edwards circa 2004. I happen to think this is economically wrong. Now, again, I think JD is a bold pick by President Trump. I think he's super articulate. I think he's quite charming. I think his life story is wonderful. If this presages an economic battle inside the Republican Party, which I think it clearly does and is meant to, then that is a battle of ideas that does need to be taken up on behalf of people who actually believe in free markets. Because there was not a mention of the free market last night, the single greatest job creator and prosperity creator in human history. But the story that JD Vance tells is that basically the reason that his town died is because of government's bad policy, as opposed to changing circumstances of the economy or the breakdown of family and social life, which is really what he kind of says in Hillbilly Elegy. So here he was telling the story of what he thinks is the story of the economy over the last few decades.
My friends, things did not work out well for a lot of kids I grew up with. Every now and then, I will get a call from a relative back home who asks, "Did you know so-and-so?" And I'll remember a face from years ago, and then I'll hear, "They died of an overdose." As always, America's ruling class wrote the checks. Communities like mine paid the price. For decades, that divide between the few with their power and comfort in Washington and the rest of us only widened. From Iraq to Afghanistan, from the financial crisis to the Great Recession, from open borders to stagnating wages, the people who govern this country have failed and failed again.
I mean, I agree that the people who govern the country have failed and failed again. But to suggest that the free markets are to blame, which is where he turns next, is a stretch. I mean, and not only a stretch, I think on a fundamental level, not true. Again, when he says that he gets a call from his hometown about somebody who died of a drug overdose, the fentanyl crisis is, in fact, a crisis that is exacerbated by Joe Biden's open border. There's no question about that. That is for sure true. It also happens to be true that his entire book is about the idea that the only pathway for individuals in a free country out of failure is a mentality that says that you can succeed. So again, his foreign policy is colored and shaded by the fact that he served in Iraq. It is colored by the fact that he served in the military, that he is a warrior, that he comes from a warrior family, and all of that has to be taken with extraordinary respect, obviously. It's also colored by the fact that the American government did blow the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. No question. And I think that shaped everybody's response to foreign policy. It's made everybody significantly more of a realist. I mean, he didn't get into his position on Ukraine. Again, I have disagreements with him on Ukraine, obviously. But with that said, I think that the generalized idea, which is that everybody is much more wary of the interventionism of American power, that's true, and it should be true, and that's good. When it comes to economics, however, the economic program that he is preaching is disconnected from the reality of why things actually happen in the economy. And so his entire kind of spiel here is, if America puts up tariffs, if America creates subsidies, then we will bring the smokestacks back to Youngstown. And the factory jobs will just come back. And it's all because of free trade. As we'll discuss in a moment, just on a factual level, this is not really true. But here he was discussing, for example, NAFTA.
When I was in the 4th grade, a career politician by the name of Joe Biden supported NAFTA, a bad trade deal that sent countless good jobs to Mexico. When I was a sophomore in high school, that same career politician named Joe Biden gave China a sweetheart trade deal that destroyed even more good American middle-class manufacturing jobs. When I was a senior in high school, that same Joe Biden supported the disastrous invasion of Iraq, and at each step of the way, in small towns like mine in Ohio or next door in Pennsylvania or Michigan, in states all across our country, jobs were sent overseas and our children were sent to war.
Okay, now let's be a little bit clear about this. Again, Joe Biden's a terrible president. He was a terrible senator. He's been wrong about everything his entire life. Also, NAFTA in the House had more Republican votes than Democrat votes. NAFTA was not, in fact, a turning point in American economics. It was not. It actually had a relatively minor impact on American economics. In fact, our exports doubled to China, to Canada and Mexico in the aftermath of NAFTA. NAFTA has sort of become a buzzword for not liking globalization generally. But the reality, the idea that NAFTA killed jobs, like here's a chart of job growth in the United States over the past few decades. Okay, here's a chart of jobs in the United States, 1969 to 2022. See if you can spot NAFTA. Can you spot NAFTA in this chart? You can't, because NAFTA really did not have an impact on job growth in the United States. It really didn't. The trajectory of American job growth was not changed by NAFTA. It simply was not. Look at manufacturing output. Okay, here's manufacturing output. Manufacturing output spiked between the advent of NAFTA and the recession of 2000. And then it spiked again between the recession of 2000 and the recession of 2008. That's real manufacturing output in the United States. Okay, so was that NAFTA? Not really. The story of the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States is actually automation. It's technology and automation. It is not actual outsourcing. Now, again, that is not a case for trade with China. Trade with China is a different thing than trade with other countries, because China is actually an enemy of the United States and should be treated as such. For national security reasons, we should have heavy restrictions on trade with China. And it was a massive mistake to do what Joe Biden did actually do, which was broaden trade with China. It was a huge bipartisan mistake. No question at all. But the case that he makes is, again, disconnected from the actual economic case. And it's disconnected from why, for example, we should have tariffs against China. I agree with JD Vance about tariffs against China for national security reasons. That is a different thing from suggesting that free trade has hollowed out the manufacturing base, and if it hadn't been for free trade, then it would be more of a segment of the American economy. In fact, manufacturing as a sector of the American economy has been in significant decline, even as real output has increased in the manufacturing sector. And that's not just true for the United States. It's true for every country, including, by the way, China. China also, manufacturing as a percentage of their GDP is actually smaller than it was 10, 15, or 20 years ago because of automation. That's just the reality. So again, when we say these things, it may make for a good story in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. It is also counter the story that he was telling in Hillbilly Elegy. Then JD Vance blamed Wall Street for the housing crisis. Now, again, this is a case the right typically has not made. Wall Street acted because the Clinton administration in its final years passed a bill that effectively redid how subprime mortgages were done. And it allowed borrowers who could not afford their houses to get into houses they could not pay for on the assumption real estate prices would continue to rise. And then mortgage companies basically jumped into that boat because they knew on the back end that the system had been perverted and they would get paid off. But according to JD Vance, it was just corporate greed. Again, the sort of language he uses on economics is typically not conservative language on economics or free market language on economics.
Months ago, I heard some young family member observe that their parents' generation, the baby boomers, could afford to buy a home when they first entered the workforce. But I don't know, this person observed, if I'll ever be able to afford a home. The absurd cost of housing is the result of so many failures, and it reveals so much about what's broken in Washington. I can tell you exactly how it happened. Wall Street barons crashed the economy and American builders went out of business. As tradesmen scrambled for jobs, houses stopped being built. The lack of good jobs, of course, led to stagnant wages. And then the Democrats flooded this country with millions of illegal aliens.
I totally agree with him about illegal immigration. Everything else that he said there, I don't think is economically correct. I mean, because it questions the why would Wall Street barons crash the economy? Why? What was the purpose of it? Did Wall Street do great during the recession years? Was Wall Street like making bank during the recession years? You made the case certain CEOs were, but certainly Wall Street as a whole was not. And it turns out that the thing that actually stifled real estate development is overregulation in largely populated areas. Okay, the mortgage rates continued to be extraordinarily low until Joe Biden's inflationary period. That's why so many people are not selling their homes now, because they have a mortgage that's locked in at 2.5% that they got in like 2012. And now the mortgage rates are at 7.5% under Joe Biden. So why aren't new houses being built? The reason new houses aren't being built is because nobody knows if they can actually afford to pay for the mortgage. So nobody's going to build that. And meanwhile, Joe Biden is trying to induce rent control. I mean, like there are a bunch of reasons for the housing crisis. But the narrative that he's telling is no different than, I mean, he himself has said that he's kind of warm toward the Bernie Sanders economic wing of the party. And there is a part of the Republican Party that is in fact that. But I think that that's a debate that should be had. Vance concluded his speech by talking about, we're done catering to Wall Street, we're catering to the working man, we're done importing foreign labor, we're going to stamp products made in America. Again, I think a lot of these things make for great bumper stickers. I just don't think that government has the power to magically redefine how global economics works. You can talk again about reshoring jobs from Vietnam, but making t-shirts in Youngstown ain't going to support Youngstown. In fact, the best case for the American economy, traditionally speaking, if you're talking about like lack of manufacturing jobs, Pittsburgh used to be a steel town. That's why they're the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now the leading sector in Pittsburgh is the healthcare industry. It turns out that economics tends to progress towards service-based industries. Now, again, you can make a case, and you should make a case, for keeping certain basic manufacturing tasks in the United States for national security reasons. That is very different from the idea that everybody in America should pay higher prices on all goods in order to benefit particular sectors of the economy on a non-national security basis, because there's no limiting principle there. And then you end up pretty quickly at universal basic income. You end up very quickly at bigger welfare benefits. You end up very quickly at giant taxes and subsidies for particular favored political interest groups. Maybe that's a good way to win elections in the Midwest. Maybe that's the goal here, but it is not good economic policy.
We're done, ladies and gentlemen, catering to Wall Street. We'll commit to the working man. We're done importing foreign labor. We're going to fight for American citizens and their good jobs and their good wages. We're done buying energy from countries that hate us. We're going to get it right here from American workers in Pennsylvania and Ohio and across the country. We're done sacrificing supply chains to unlimited global trade, and we're going to stamp more and more products with that beautiful label, made in the USA. We're going to build factories again, put people to work making real products for American families made with the hands of American workers. Together, we will protect the wages of American workers and stop the Chinese Communist Party from building their middle class on the backs of American citizens.
He's making promises here that I just don't think anyone can keep. Forget about JD Vance. I don't think anyone can keep it. I think Democrats my entire life have been making these promises. Warren made those promises. Sanders makes these promises. They're not true when anyone says it. Again, first of all, the idea that Wall Street has nothing to do with American prosperity is just not true. Okay, the reality is that investment, first of all, Most people have a 401k at this point in the United States, or at least have investments in the stock market. At least 50% of Americans have investments in the stock market, which is why it matters how the stock market does. Pension funds are in the stock market. Investment actually matters. It creates a pool for innovation. Innovation is what drives the economy forward, which is why you have nicer stuff than your parents or grandparents did. It is why you are living a better life, economically speaking, than, yes, your parents. It's why you have a cell phone. It is why you have a better TV. It is why you have internet access. It's why you have all these wonderful things. The way we even measure economics in the United States is broken because the stuff that we have is way nicer than the stuff that we had 15, 20 years ago. Inside my own lifetime, try explaining to your kids about the stuff that you used in 1999. They won't even know what you're talking about. And that's because of innovation. That is because of free markets. And so undermining that is not something that I think is a particularly good idea. And by the way, I should mention here, Donald Trump didn't actually undermine it during his first term. Donald Trump uses many of the same phrases about tariff policy. He uses a lot of the same phrases about global trade and about economics. But Donald Trump cut regulations. Donald Trump cut taxes. You want to know why Donald Trump had a historically good economy? It's because he didn't do a lot of the stuff that JD Vance is talking about right here. Okay, one of the other aspects of JD Vance's speech that's getting a lot of attention is his point, and it was also made by the World War II veteran who spoke yesterday, that America is not just an idea, it's a homeland, which of course is absolutely true. Here is Senator Vance last night.
America is not just an idea. It is a group of people with a shared history and a common future. It is, in short, a nation. Now, it is part of that tradition, of course, that we welcome newcomers. But when we allow newcomers into our American family, we allow them on our terms. People will not fight for abstractions, but they will fight for their home. And if this movement of ours is going to succeed, and if this country is going to thrive, our leaders have to remember that America is a nation and its citizens deserve leaders who put its interests first.
Okay, now, again, I agree with everything he's saying. I'm just not sure what he's arguing against. Because obviously America is a nation. France is also a nation. Poland is also a nation. Right? When he says that America is a land, yes, so is literally every other land. That's true. And America happens to be the best land. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. It's the best land and it's the best nation. But why? Why? And the answer is the idea that's connected to those things. So he says that America is not just an idea. And of course, that's true. I think the thing that he's arguing against, and here I agree with him, I think the thing he's arguing against is this sort of abstracted idea that Joe Biden uses all the time, where he says it's not who we are. And what he means by that is it's not who the left is. Okay, the attempt to universalize American values in the sense that they can either be exported to Iraq or imported from Guatemala. That's silly and it's wrong. And I think that's what he is saying right there. But when he says that people don't fight for ideas, obviously that's not true. That's certainly not true. I mean, I'm sorry, the Cold War was a war of ideas. It turns out it was not just a war of territories. Otherwise, it would be like most European wars, which are wars of territory. Turns out that people fight for ideas all the time. The idea is connected to the home. That's what makes America a nation. And I think that's what he's trying to say. I hope that's what he's trying to say. Because otherwise, I'm not sure what the exact what is he arguing against? That's really the question that I'm asking here. And I know there are a lot of people online who are taking like significant pleasure in this particular line, but it's obviously self-evident. America is not just an idea. Lots of things are just an idea. Right? Quantum physics is just an idea. It's not a nation. It's not a home. And obviously that's true. Obviously that's true. But the point of the American idea is even stated by JD Vance there, which is you can join. If America were only a nation, or if it were only a home, how would you join it? Obviously he thinks you can join it, which means that the idea is very much in contention. If what he means is like baseline patriotism, wave the flag, this land matters, it matters where I'm born and where I die, obviously agree. Obviously agree. And I assume that's what he means by that. Alrighty. Meanwhile, a couple assassination updates. We have a little bit more information on the assassination. It just gets weirder and more disturbing. Apparently, according to Jackie Heinrich of Fox News, when investigators have now reviewed the laptop of the assassin, the attempted assassin, he said, July 13th will be my premiere. Watch as it unfolds. That was the Trump rally. They also found searches for Trump, Biden, and when is the DNC convention. The suspect had 2 cell phones. The primary phone was recovered from the scene along with a remote transmitter detonator. A secondary cell phone was found at the home. It had only 27 contacts. The FBI is trying to track down and interview those people. So it's getting very, very weird. Also, The Secret Service apparently identified the shooter as a threat 10 minutes before Donald Trump went on stage and let Donald Trump go on the stage anyway. Not a good look, Secret Service. What the hell is going on? Well, you're not going to get any answers from the head of the Secret Service, who's tracked down and badgered by multiple members of Congress yesterday at the Republican National Convention.
Very disappointed in your leadership. I have called for your resignation, and I'd rather you resign tonight or start answering our questions right now about the death threat to President Trump.
Why would anyone allow the president to go on stage when you know you've got a potential threat and you've got snipers that are trained on it?
No shame, no concern. Protect the President of the United States.
You owe nothing. You owe President Trump answers. You cannot keep running, but you cannot hide from
to the people of the United States.
Okay, she didn't obviously give any answers, nor was she going to. The good news, according to the Democrats, is that Donald Trump's bravery in surviving the assassination attempt, getting up, pumping his fist, and all of that, it's absolutely equivalent to Joe Biden surviving COVID right now. Like, that's an actual thing they are arguing. Here is Joy Reid.
These two men are both elderly. Donald Trump is an elderly man who, for whatever reason, was given 9 seconds to take a iconic photo op during an active shooter situation. Weird situation. We'll figure that out one day. But his survival of that and bouncing right back and going right to his convention is being conveyed in the media world as a sign of strength. This current president of the United States is 81 years old and has COVID. Should he be fine in a couple of days? Doesn't that convey exactly the same thing? That he's strong enough, older than Trump, to have gotten something that used to really be fatal to people his age. So if he does fine out of it and comes back and is able to do rallies, isn't that exactly the same? I mean, it's not exactly the same. It's not the same incident, but it's an elderly man coming through out of an illness.
It should.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, guys, you got it. You hit it right on the head. Joe Biden surviving COVID, which is a cold at this point, is just the same. It's the same. Nailed it. All right, guys, coming up, we will be joined on the line by Clay Travis of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.